The Leafs play one of their worst third periods of the season as they fall to the Canucks in Vancouver. Welcome into Rink-Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog. Free casino games and sports odds. It is time to play at bodog.net. Rob Wong joined alongside by David Alter, who comes to us from the Rink-Wide Studios out in Vancouver as he witnessed the Maple Leafs losing to the Canucks tonight 4-1. And yes, of course, after playing one of the best third periods of the season in Calgary, the Maple Leafs put up a stinker in the final 20 minutes on the road against the Canucks, Dave. But holy smokes, a lot to unpack from this game tonight. We've got some injuries to talk about. We've got some injury scares to talk about. Just kind of a mixed bag on Hockey Night in Canada tonight for the Maple Leafs in a losing effort in Vancouver.
Yeah, it was. We'll get to a lot of that, but I just want to say being there, and I've been to a lot of Toronto, Vancouver games, and, for the Canucks, there's really not a lot to play for, and they're trying to prove themselves, but they just show up for these Leafs. They do. They always have. I think it's 16 out of the last 18 that they've won, and I even remember being here 2 years ago during the All-Canadian COVID season, and the Canucks were just coming back from being away for 2 weeks, and they just really get back into it and are just somehow they always just pull out the victory. They're just really, really animated for it. And then right off the hop, Tyler Myers gets that big hit on John Tavares. It just sets the pace and energy for what was just a bump in atmosphere there. It was crazy. Like these were fun games to watch again, where you got the hitting, you got the skill. For a long time, there weren't a lot of goals, but the energy level was just through the roof. It was a lot of fun being there tonight.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it might have even been before that, Luke Schenn starting the game and throwing two big hits to start things off against his former team. You knew he was going to start off the game. Sheldon Keefe loves to, play up those types of situations for, guys returning in certain situations or playing in their hometown. So, definitely wanted to get a spark, and Luke Schenn delivered that and kind of set the tone. And as you mentioned, that big hit by Tyler Myers, we will get to that coming up in a moment. But, I guess the first things first is, a lot of people watching that game saw the injury to Ryan O'Reilly, who took a Auston Matthews slap shot off the hand late in the second period, did not come out to play the third. What is the latest there with regards to Ryan O'Reilly?
Yeah, usually at some point, Sheldon Keefe likes to, if they know it's going to be a while or anything, he'll hint but there was nothing. He just said that there'll be an update for us on Monday when the Leafs are next scheduled to practice in Newark. So that's not a good sign. Usually if it's not something serious or something serious, then there would be some sort of inkling, but he just wasn't in a mood to share at that point. And Auston Matthews did briefly mention something about missing O'Reilly in that game sucked, and just brought it up on his own, and that's also not usually a good sign. It's a lot of speculation, I know, but it's tough because, Leaf fans, they're very, I don't know what the word is for just thinking of the worst possible case scenario. And then when Ryan O'Reilly doesn't come back, people start to get these vibes of other injuries to other acquisitions that they've made in recent years. And so I guess we will find out later. But yeah, that's a tough blow if they lose Ryan O'Reilly. That was a huge trade deadline acquisition, as were a lot of other guys that they picked up over the last week. And so I guess we're just going to have to find out on Monday. Perhaps maybe one of the insiders might get some sort of inkling there, but that's not a good sign. I thought initially he was going to be okay because I saw that block shot. He definitely shook his hand out, and then another Canuck tapped him with the glove on that same hand, and he was pissed. Like he swung his stick right back at that guy after doing that, and then when the horn sounded, because it was right at the end of the second. I was watching to see if he would just kind of go from the bench to straight out, but he stepped back out onto the ice and, just did his regular routine stuff on the ice before going. So I kind of thought if it was something major, he would rush right back to the room, but he didn't do that. So I guess we're going to find out on Monday. But yeah, that's a tough blow if it ends up being anything major for a number 90.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I didn't say I Googled, how long does a broken finger take to heal? Because that's sort of what it seemed like when he took that shot off the hand. But as you said, I mean, it's all speculation. Like, there's really
Right.
no point in us saying one way or another because we just don't know. And we're going to have to wait a couple of days to find out what's going on there. But as far as the game itself, the Maple Leafs had a really strong first period. We're not very good in the second period. Vancouver coming out and taking it to the Leafs in what has been their best period pretty much all season long is the second period. Luckily enough for them, they only allowed just one goal on a power play goal by Andrei Kuzmenko. And then in the third, they get an early power play. They tie things up on a sweet feed from Willie Nylander to John Tavares, and it feels like they have the momentum, and then they end up getting a power play really early on in the third period. You're thinking, okay, like this is where the Leafs, turn it up. We saw what they did in Calgary the other night, and go figure, the Canucks score two shorthanded goals in 44 seconds to take the 3-1 lead, and that was pretty much all she wrote for the rest of the way. But let's hear from Morgan Rielly, who was asked about the team's mistakes on that third period man advantage.
I don't think we took our foot off the gas or lost focus or anything like that. If anything, it's the opposite. You realize the opportunity that you have to go out and try to win a game or put yourself in a position to win a game. I don't think it's mindset. You can obviously make that argument considering the outcome of the power play, but from my perspective, it's just a couple mistakes, and good players will make you pay.
Yeah, and it's tough that both of the mistakes end up in the back of the net. It's one thing if you make the mistake and it doesn't end up being a goal, but, John Tavares with a bit of a lazy pass trying to throw the puck cross ice. And then, on the second goal, Dave, you've got Morgan Rielly taking it into the zone, drops it off to John Tavares, who drops it off to Auston Matthews. He tries to rim it around, and it ends up going to nobody. And, of course, JT Miller ends up getting the breakaway pass there, and he scores that goal to make it 3-1. And, Sheldon Keefe ends up really, benching that power play after that second goal. Maybe he thought about it after the first one, but, just sort of a disaster for the Leafs in that spot. And, maybe it's the game that's 3 and 4 nights, and maybe they've got tired legs, they've got, tired minds, but just, if you're Sheldon Keefe, you want your team to be able to clean up these little mistakes and not have, a situation where on a power play, the game is slipping away. I can't imagine what was going through his mind watching all of that.
Yeah, look, it's tough, right? He was even pressed afterwards if he thought about, switching the unit after that first power play goal to go with the secondary unit. But of course, there's no Ryan O'Reilly on there. It's only 15 seconds. He kind of has to stick with it, and that's pretty much it. And so that's the Leafs just trying to be the aggressive way that they can, but making mistakes. The team's going to make mistakes, and I think he's trying right now to just have a longer rope with this because there are new guys, although the power play is the same usual guys. He also has Auston Matthews coming back in and playing hurt. And it's a difficult balance where that's happening and it's affecting how you're going to kind of move things around. And you kind of have to sit back a little bit and just kind of assess the situation and also believe in yourself in terms of just trying to, get in there and be able to right the ship, because the Leafs have been resilient even after their mistakes. So one good early, then 2 bad in the same one. And then you just kind of have to have this belief that they're going to kind of fix it. And unfortunately for the Toronto Maple Leafs on this night, with a lot of stuff going on and with not a lot of options in that third period and a poor execution in that second period at even strength, which we'll talk about as well. Just really difficult for the Leafs to kind of maneuver around.
Yeah, just a lot of weird things happening in this game for the Maple Leafs, but the lack of execution, like you said, definitely coming back to bite them. But, they dodged some bullets here with Auston Matthews, who did leave the game after taking a Noel Juleson shot off the inside of his right leg They were in the late stages of the first period, and it did not look good. Let's just put it that way. I mean, he was down for a while there, and you just kind of hope for the best. He, limped off and skated off on his own power and did not come out to start the second period. And all of a sudden, it's sort of, Willis Reed style. Auston Matthews comes back out onto the bench halfway through the period, and you're like, okay, that's great that he's not out for the rest of the game, but clearly it did affect him the rest of the stretch in this game. Let's hear from Auston Matthews, who says he was definitely hurting even though he came back to the game.
Not great. I mean, just try to grind my way through it. Didn't feel too great, but felt fine to play. So
just a bruise, like just a stinger, or seriously?
Yeah, it just caught me in a weird spot and just stung. So it still stings, but I was able to just get it to calm down, and like I said, just was able to get out there, grind it out, and had some good chances. Obviously, I think just that one power play that they scored the 2 goals really just, we dug ourselves in that hole, and it was tough to climb out of it.
And look, you can just tell from hearing Auston Matthews speak about it, Dave definitely was not feeling too great about his leg and getting it to where he was. But, he's gotten it out. I think that's a good sign. And, if this was a playoff game, he definitely would continue playing. I'm a little bit surprised that he came back even for this regular season game. You would have figured immediately get some treatment on that and, make sure that you're good to go on Tuesday. The Maple Leafs have a couple of days off here, so you don't want to push it. But, for all the criticism I think Auston Matthews gets at times for being a guy that, has been banged up through his NHL career, I'm sure he thought in the back of his mind, like, I'm good to go. Let me get back out there. Like, I don't want to give up on this team. It's an important game, of course. They're trying to rack up as many points as they can. So he was clearly hobbled by it, did not, look that great out there at times, but, just a good sign that he was able to return to that game, and we'll see how he is come Tuesday against New Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, that's the number one thing. When I saw it, I took an optimistic approach, thinking to myself, he is not getting carried or assisted. I mean, he was getting assisted, but he wasn't to the point where he wasn't putting on it weight on anything. He could still kind of go. And then you look at the replay, you try to play doctor, you're kind of like, oh, okay, well, I mean, it could be nerves. I remember Tavares, I think it was this year, he had something where it just hit nerves and it looked really bad at the time, and then he was able to come back, and it kind of gave me those vibes where it was just one of those things where the nerves are just screaming uncle, and no matter what you do, there's nothing you can do that will bring that down, even though structurally everything is kind of okay. We saw him after the game. He walked to us fine. He seemed, for the most part, fine. There wasn't any sort of obvious discomfort when he faced us for the scrum. When we asked for him, they said it would be a little while because he was going to be on the trainer's table. And then they're like, do you still want him? We're like, yes. In fact, if that was a reason why we wanted him even more. So for the most part, it looked like from a long-term standpoint, they've got 2 days here before their next game, that it doesn't seem like anything that's going to bother him. But you do wonder because, he was dealing with something earlier in the season that appears to have gone away, but then he had this knee injury. And then, now in hindsight, I kind of wish if this kind of hit him in the area where he had that discomfort before. But I'll digress on that. Something I could think about for the next one. But yeah, when you look at all of those, it just looked like it was fine, and he's been dealing with a lot. And then the number one thing when I was doing research for a possible Auston Matthews leaves the game and doesn't return, which obviously didn't happen, that was his NHL leading 77th block shot as a forward this season. And so when we talk about Auston Matthews and the numbers being down, I don't remember Auston Matthews being the big shot blocker. But among forwards, he is, and it kind of speaks to the 200-foot game, the other stuff that he's doing. And unfortunately, this one was a very painful shot block, but it kind of speaks to the kind of different things Auston Matthews has put into this game and has had to deal with and had to persevere through.
Honestly, it makes me, think of the conversation about, maybe Auston Matthews playing on the penalty kill, a while back ago, and people saying, you don't want Auston Matthews out there blocking shots. Well, he's blocking shots at 5-on-5 all the time. So,
yeah,
I mean, is there really that big of a difference if he's out there on the penalty kill, trying to block shots? And, the Maple Leafs haven't gone that route, of course. I mean, they've got very effective penalty killers already, but it is kind of funny that way, that the concern about Auston Matthews blocking shots on the penalty kill, but not a ton of concern seemingly at 5-on-5 as he's leading the league for forwards, which is pretty crazy. But he's a big guy, so he's a big target out there, and unfortunately suffered a painful block shot tonight, but luckily was able to make his return to the lineup. And, it was a physical game all around, as we said, right off the hop. Luke Schenn, Tyler Myers setting the tone, and John Tavares takes that big hit from Tyler Myers, has his head down, and the way his head, was thrown back, and he slides into the end boards and looks like he might not get up. Eventually he did, and luckily was fine, finished the game. But, it was hard not to think about the concussion, of course, that he suffered a couple of years ago, and that freak hit, with Corey Perry and everything. And, you're just hoping for the best, and luckily was able to come back. But, the big thing to come out of that, of course, Jake McCabe, new Maple Leaf, a guy that, has dropped the gloves in the past, steps in there for John Tavares, protecting his captain, throws down with, 6'7" Tyler Myers. And it was interesting to hear John Tavares speak post-game about McCabe stepping in for him.
I want to thank him after. Obviously, anytime someone comes in and steps up for you, obviously means a lot. So, especially a new guy that's just getting acclimated. So, not an easy thing to do. So, definitely much appreciated.
And this has definitely been a topic, of conversation this year, Dave, about the Leafs, standing up for each other and, showing a little bit more, quote unquote, toughness and grittiness and those kind of things. And, as John Tavares said, I mean, it does say a lot that Jake McCabe, a new guy, coming in here and stepping in sort of, adds to that, chemistry, if you will, of, guys pulling on the same rope. And I think it was a good sign and good to see.
Yeah. And so I'm glad we're addressing this, because one of the kind of lost in the shuffle moments in there that I really noticed from that whole transgression there with Myers and Tavares and McCabe was that William Nylander actually tried to step in first before McCabe was even in there.
Oh, I missed that.
And I'd never seen that before. Like Nylander, now it could be the camera angles, right? That's why we go. That's why we're at every game. But I'm looking at it. It's happening right below me. And Nylander actually steps right in and tries to do something, which, I think it was a cross check or something. He tried to make a grab, but obviously he's outmatched by Myers at that point. So he goes down, but McCabe obviously steps in right after to kind of do what Jake McCabe is supposed to do on this team. But William Nylander stepping up and trying to do something in that moment, to me, was just kind of the spillover effect of what I think the Leafs were trying to do, which was, you bring all these other guys and it's going to make the core guys kind of do all these things too. I'd never seen William Nylander jump in like that after seeing a guy get hit. That, to me, was what really stood out about that particular moment. And then even after that, William Nylander's first period was phenomenal. That was one of the best periods I'd seen him play. And we keep saying that with each podcast when we're talking about wins or everything else, about how complete a player William Nylander has become. And that particular moment was like, wow, this is another dimension. Sure, he got shoved away pretty quickly, but he had the fortitude to step in there when he sees his captain get hit like that before anyone else was around against a giant like Tyler Myers. And to me, that was a great thing to see.
Yeah, I'm really curious here. Okay, so it's funny. I just brought up the highlights. So John Tavares gets knocked down, and the first guy, you're right, is William Nylander, and he comes in with a bit of a high cross check on Tyler Myers. So you're right, it is pretty rare that we see that. I didn't notice it in the moment. I was thinking, I think I was a little bit more concerned for. I think I was a little bit more concerned for Tavares in that moment, watching him down on the ice.
It was my angle. It was my angle where I'm watching the game, right? So if I'm watching it on TV, they're obviously focused on the hit and how Tavares looks, because that's story number one. But to me, I'm looking at away from that, and I'm seeing, oh my God, William Nylander is coming to the rescue here. And so, I mean, it didn't happen the way, or it probably happened the way we would expect it when you look at the mismatch like that. But that's why Jake McCabe comes in right after too, because he's just like, all right, I'm going to take care of business here. He gets 2, 5, and 10 for that, but that's what he came to do. It was, I think, the right thing to do at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've seen it all season long, whether it's Mark Giordano with the Luthez press on Travis Konechny or, Michael Bunting dropping the gloves for a hit on Auston Matthews. I mean, this has been, a regular thing for the Maple Leafs this year, standing up for each other. And, Jake McCabe stepping in there tonight for John Tavares. And like you mentioned, William Nylander even trying to get a shot in there. Now, had William Nylander dropped the gloves, I think all of Leafs Nation would have lost their collective minds.
This pod would be all about that.
It would have been one of the highlights of the season, win, lose, or draw for William Nylander. That would have been crazy to talk about. But luckily for Nylander, he didn't get himself involved in Tyler Myers. That's a little bit too big of a weight class, I think. But kudos to Jake McCabe for stepping in there. And, just to get back to the physicality of this game, I mean, we saw the Maple Leafs finishing a lot of checks there in the first period. Same with Vancouver. And, it was interesting to, watch that game. And to be honest, I mean, we are rink-wide Toronto. We don't watch a ton of Vancouver Canucks games. So I did reach out to an old colleague in Dan Riccio of Sportsnet. And I said, hey, Dan, like, are the Canucks running people like all the time under Rick Tocchet? He's like, no, like this is not a regular thing. So kind of lends credence to, like you said, the atmosphere in tonight's game where, the Canucks know there's going to be a lot of Leafs fans and they know it's going to be, a big hype game on Hockey Night in Canada. And it felt like they wanted to send a message with the physicality, and the Leafs responded. And, that's why they went out and got the likes of Jake McCabe and Noel Acciari and Sam Lafferty and Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Shen. Like, this is seemingly the type of style of hockey that the Leafs, want to lean into a little bit here over the final 6 weeks of the season and into the playoffs.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you've got Hall as the guy who has shown that he can go and fight on that one pair. You've got Shen on that third pair who can do something there. And then they had McCabe on the top pair, I guess, if you want to call it that, right? So there were different guys, if something like that can happen, that can answer the bell and step up for their teammates. Like that's the biggest thing when it comes to all of this. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's good to see it. Now, there's a lot of time. There's less than 20 games left between now and the end of the regular season. And so they've got to figure out what this team is, right? They've got this aggressiveness, but they've got to, make sure they don't have these bad periods and lulls. Like there's been kind of stepping back or having a good period or needing a good third period and locking it down defensively. There's just been lapses at times in all three of these games on the road trips in Seattle. And I talk about those 3 games because of the moves they made after that game against the Kraken. So these are things we have to kind of keep in mind, that while all this stuff is good and they brought that physicality, they don't get away from the offensive mindset and they don't run the risk of doing too much too quickly or changing what they are. They still really need to be a good possession team through and not lose sight of that.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely concerns right now with the offense, at least at 5-on-5. I know tonight they performed a little bit better than maybe they did the other night in Calgary in the first period, but those final 40 minutes weren't great. The third period, of course, is a lot of score adjusted hockey when the Leafs are chasing the game down 3-1 and 4-1. But you look at these last few games now on this road trip, and it's 1 high danger chance against the Oilers. It's 7 against the Flames. Now, granted, the Flames are a very strong defensive team. No offense to the Canucks, but they're not a particularly good team, and maybe it was was the tired legs or what have you, but only 6 high danger chances tonight for the Maple Leafs at 5-on-5 against Vancouver. So, you've added all these names and these new guys into the mix. And, as much as the Leafs are trying to play a bit of a different style at times with some of the additions, they're still a team that, historically scores a lot of goals. And when you've got Nylander, Marner, Matthews, and Tavares, seemingly 6 high danger chances at 5-on-5 in any given game feels unacceptable when they're a team that's put up way more than that against, any other teams around the league. So not saying that it's a trend here, but, definitely something that this team is probably going to keep an eye on and try to figure out how they can get more out of their offense, which has been in a bit of a rut the last few games.
It's a concern for me in this game because Calgary is supposed to be a good team. Edmonton is a good team with great players, but they have shoddy goaltending and sometimes the defense kind of gets in the way. But Vancouver's a bad team, and that's universally understood. And so, yeah, the Leafs have lost to games against Vancouver before, but they've always been the weirdest circumstances where they were clearly the better team, pushing the pace of play. And in that opening period, that's what the Leafs were doing. Even with all the crazy stuff that was kind of happening, the shots at one point were still really lopsided. Vancouver had 2 power plays early on, and Toronto was still pushing the pace of play. So when it went south the way it did in periods number 2 and 3 and it got worse, I thought to myself, against a team that's not good, that to me was a bit of a concern. You had the silver lining that they figured out in the 3rd period against Calgary, and that's all well and good. But that's not a good message. It is a long road trip, but still, this you should have had a better showing for a complete 60 minutes. Yeah, Auston Matthews got hurt and did come back hurt. Yes, Ryan O'Reilly didn't miss the 3rd, but there were problems in that 2nd period before it, and your guys weren't scoring. And Matt Murray made a 2-on-0 save that was crazy, where perhaps the game could have even been blown out earlier than that. So there's definitely issues that the Leafs need to address with everything that's going on right now.
Yeah, and things will not get easier come next week when they have to take on the New Jersey Devils, who are a pretty darn good team and have made some impressive additions as well at the trade deadline. But coming up on Rink-Wide Toronto, we will get to the return of Matt Murray. We'll talk a little bit more about the 7 defensemen that dressed in this one, and maybe we'll take a look at some former Maple Leafs in their new digs as Rasmus Sandin, Pierre Engvall made their debuts for the Capitals and Islanders, respectively. Leafs lose, though, 4-1 to the Vancouver Canucks. You're listening to Rink-Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, free casino games and sports odds. It is time to play at bodog.net. It's Rink-Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game. It is Rink-Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, the place to play free casino games and get the latest sports odds. Rob Wong, joined alongside by David Alter, who comes to us from the Rink-Wide Vancouver studios. Maple Leafs losing to the Canucks tonight 4-1. Time for the Bodog line of the day. And coming into this game tonight, the Leafs were minus 200 or better favorites on most sports books, including on Bodog, and the Canucks were spoilers of that party. They've now won their last 6 games against the Leafs in Vancouver. And in fact, I saw a tweet from Rink-Wide Vancouver's Jeff Patterson that the Canucks were 15-2 in their last 17 home games against the Leafs. That's now 16-2, of course, after this 4-1 win. Just one of the more bizarre anomalies, I think. And like you said, I mean, it's always seemingly weird, crazy things that happen to the Leafs in this game. And I don't think there's anything to read into it that, the Canucks are going to dominate the Maple Leafs for the rest of the time in Vancouver. But yeah, it's just one of those weird things that every time the Leafs seem to go to Vancouver right now, they end up on the wrong end of things.
Yeah, and so this reminds me, similar to Toronto's really bad record at HSBC Arena for a long period of time, if you remember, Rob. Like, they had something really stupidly long like that as well until like the last 2-3 years. They finally kind of corrected their bad record in Buffalo, but it was extraordinarily bad even when they had good teams. Like, it was just really bad, and I wish I could recall the number. Hopefully one of our listeners will like tweet at me and let me know. But it was really bad for a long period of time. And it wasn't until like 2018, 2019 that it finally started correcting course and the Leafs were actually able to start getting some wins there. So not unusual for the Toronto Maple Leafs to have really weird things happen to them like that and quirky things. But I don't know. It's a really, really strange setup, the way things are kind of going, to be able to just not get these closed. And this is why, we talk about sports wagering and everything. I always say, if it's plus 200 or better, it's always good odds because teams win games all the time, 1 out of every 3, it seems, no matter who the competition is. It just seems to be the case that if you see a plus 200, you're just better off taking it for the odds or better. And so not surprised that it went this way tonight.
Yeah, you got to be really bad to lose that many games. I mean, even this year, the San Jose Sharks have won 18 games, right? They've found a way to win that much, even though they have the fewest wins in the National Hockey League this season. But always strange when the Maple Leafs go to Vancouver. If you want to keep riding that trend, I mean, why not? The Canucks seem to get the job done right now more often than not against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But let's talk about Matt Murray, who finally made his return, Dave. He's been working his way back from that ankle issue, hasn't played since January, which is crazy to think. And, he comes in and early on was not tested very much in that first period because the Maple Leafs were dominating the shot clock and were in Vancouver's end for most of that period. But in that second period, ends up giving up a power play goal to the Canucks. It was double deflected, so not really much he could do there. But, like you said, makes an unreal 2-on-0 save on Christian Wolanin on a breakaway there by the Canucks. And, had a couple of big stops on another breakaway as well. Third period, tough to give up the shorthanded goals, but again, put in a really bad spot there. Let's hear from the Maple Leafs goaltender, who was asked about how he felt in his return.
Yeah, I felt pretty good. It's just nice to be back out there. I think, I think the game comes down to that first shorthanded goal. I think if I make a save there, I think it's a totally different game. So, I think that's one that I got to have, but felt pretty good all in all.
Those are two pretty good players coming down.
Yeah, and Murray did almost make that save, Dave. I mean, a great goal by Elias Pettersson to open him up and slide it through 5-hole. But what did you think of Murray in his first game back, considering he hasn't played since late January?
Defied my expectations. I mean, look, the last time he took a warm-up, he couldn't play. And so, that was one of the number one things I was looking for throughout my entire pregame prep was, okay, let's see how he warms up. Let's see if he can get through it. Once I saw that he was in bold in the roster report just before the game as a starter, I'm like, all right, he's going to play. It's actually going to happen this time. So that was the first hurdle for me. And then at that point, I'm watching him and he doesn't have a lot of action, right? Like that first period was so heavily tilted in Toronto's favor. And then what he's seeing is just craziness. Grade A chance after grade A chance. That 2-on-0 save might be like it's definitely his save of the season. It might be a bunch of other goalies' save of the season. I haven't watched enough saves this year to know for sure, but that was just absolute insanity to get the pad on it and to go across the right way on a 2-on-0, a complete 2-on-0 to make that save. After that game could have just really gone to the races for Vancouver had they scored. And to make that save, even to take the blame on that first one, I didn't, that one on the power play, I didn't necessarily agree. He's done that at times to just kind of take responsibility. But to me, I'm just kind of like, I get it. Like, you're trying to eat some humble pie here, but that was not really his fault. And, Sheldon Keefe said afterwards, not going to look good in the save percentage. That's probably true based on how it happened. But, I mean, these are not his fault. That was as good of a game as you could ask for. And I still think he's going to be a great, if playoff experience needed, break glass option for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think, all things considered, it was a good return. Number one, he made it through healthy. That's really the biggest thing. If he had to leave this one with, aggravating the ankle, then, oh boy, then who knows what everyone's feelings would be. But, he made the start, looked good. Couple of tough chances there that end up in the back of the net, of course. But overall, I think you're pretty happy with what Matt Murray was able to do tonight, and they made a couple of massive saves to keep his team in it. Just did not get enough help on the night as the Canucks win this one 4-1. But the Maple Leafs going with 7 defensemen again tonight and 11 forwards. Before we get your thoughts, let's hear from head coach Sheldon Keefe on that decision.
Yeah, it was a challenge for sure with the energy there, especially when you lost Auston to start the second period, and even when he came back, he's not at 100% in terms of his skating and stuff. So you're shorthanded there for sure, and it becomes even harder to manage. We were close to bringing a defenseman back up front, but certainly not ideal when you're 11-7 that you end up losing 2 forwards at 2 different times. But again, at the same time, it's strange how it works because we didn't have McCabe for the first period, so having the six other D helped in that case. So I guess there's give and take with everything.
Yeah, Sheldon Keefe, pretty, sort of, not too happy about having to lose a forward in Ryan O'Reilly and Jake McCabe there, but it's interesting to hear his explanation just about how things kind of worked out, Dave. But it made sense to me to go with 7 defensemen in Calgary when, that was put out there. You're on the back-to-back, and, Timothy Liljegren gets banged up in Edmonton. But, what did you think when you heard that Keefe was going back to the well in this game with a day off heading into Vancouver?
Yeah, what was really interesting is we didn't know until the line rushes because they didn't do an availability before the game, which was unusual in its own right. But so we watch the rushes. We see 7 defensemen again, and then I'm starting to think, okay, they said Timothy Liljegren was a little banged up, but he's not injured or whatever the case may be. I'm starting to think to myself, okay, what's actually happening here? You said you didn't like going 11-7, but now you're going 11-7 for the second game in a row when it barely squeaked out a victory for you in that game against the Calgary Flames. So I'm starting to wonder, is he hurt or is Timothy Liljegren the 8th defenseman on this team? That's a bit of an unusual situation because you really want to develop this guy. Everyone kind of has him further up, and having him not play is an unusual decision. I'd like to think he's going to get back in for this game against the Devils in a couple of days. But yeah, it's a really bizarre decision unless we're just not being told that Liljegren is actually dealing with something, because I know you want to get your new guys involved and all of that makes sense, but the Leafs have space now to call up 1 extra forward while they wait on Matthew Nyes and his season to end. So, and of course, depending on what the prognosis is on Ryan O'Reilly, they're going to have to bring up a forward anyway, possibly. So this is unusual. I think they got to go back to 12-6 here, but you also have to get Liljegren into a game because I think you have to develop this guy. He's been good. I think you're missing some of his elements here from the way he moves the puck, and you're just doing too much too quickly. That's shaking the foundation, which is leading to kind of the craziness that we're seeing.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit strange that, the additions that they've made have all of a sudden, taken over for Liljegren. I mean, we don't know for sure. We know he is not 100% because he was banged up there. I would tend to think that's the case. I mean, how do you have a guy in Liljegren this year take that step, and he's done everything you've asked him for, and then all of a sudden you add, no offense to Eric Gustafsson and Luke Schenn, but you add those 2 guys, and now he's just completely out of the rotation. It just seems kind of odd that the Maple Leafs would, go about that. But I guess we'll see on Tuesday. Okay, got to talk about this because I know being on Twitter, it was definitely a topic of conversation tonight. And, if you didn't watch the game and you looked at the box score, it's standing out like a big red light. But Morgan Rielly, a -3 tonight, did lead the Leafs in ice time with 21 minutes and 39 seconds. The 4th goal, a soft play in his own end as Brock Besser takes the puck away from him, and it ends up in the back of the net. What did you think of Riley's game tonight and just the stretch that he's been on here? Because there's been some tough nights for him, and quite frankly, it's been a bit of a tough season at times. He's been getting so many different partners, and just the success has not been there this season for Morgan Riley.
Well, I mean, again, this is them doing a lot, mixing a lot of guys. I still think Riley Brody is optimal. Like, you don't see these kind of things when you have Riley Brody. You just don't. Now, I get that, Riley should be good enough to kind of mix it around and kind of go with different guys. I get that. But is Riley Shen an optimal pair? And then when you're mixing around with the 7D, is that an optimal pair? I don't know. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. There's just too much going on, and you got to keep it simple with him. Like, I think that's becoming more and more evident. The more they just put on him and change things up, whether he wants to admit it or not, it's not going well. And so stick to what, from an underlying stats standpoint, shows, which is Riley Brody is good. You move your guys down. And if you don't want to do that, put Timothy Liljegren back in and put him back there, because that was the next second best option there from an underlying statistics standpoint and pushing the pace of play. Everything else that's going on and rotating guys in and out is just not working for him. That is evident. That is clear. And yeah, this was not a good game for him. That penalty he took certainly didn't help. I did ask him about that. There was a lot of discourse about how weak that call was. And then, of course, that led to Vancouver's first goal. But, yeah, I think they have to keep it simple with Morgan Riley, and they're making a lot of different changes there. And I don't know if there's just this understanding that, hey, it's going to be this way for a while, so just kind of navigate it till we go with what our actual plan is going to be for the playoffs. But you start to wonder, are they going to destroy his confidence after a certain period of time? Because there's just a lot of shuffling going around, and he's the third pair guy right now based on these matchups, even though he's playing a lot of minutes, and playing, I guess, the second most shifts. TJ Brody played a little bit less, but had more shifts. So yeah, it's a really strange situation.
Yeah, this one was a weird one tonight because, I said prior to the game, he's starting it with Luke Shen. I was really interested to see what his usage would be, because in Calgary, he was the defenseman with the fifth most minutes for the Maple Leafs on that night. And, it didn't help that Jake McCabe played like nothing in that first period after taking, that instigator penalty and then the 10-minute misconduct. So, we'll get a better sense on Tuesday, I think, of, how the Leafs might want to be using Morgan Riley here moving forward. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens next week. And, with Ryan O'Reilly, we said before, we're not going to speculate, but, if he's not able to play on Tuesday, because the Leafs are going to go back to 12 forwards, you would think. And, that's going to set things up a little bit more differently on the back end with the Maple Leafs maybe not going with 7 defensemen moving forward here. But a lot of things to consider right now on the back end for Sheldon Keefe. Before we get to medium meal musings to wrap this up, of course, with your trip to Vancouver, got to talk about a couple of former Maple Leafs who made their debuts in some new cities with some new teams. Pierre Engvall did not register a point, but the Islanders did pick up a win in his debut with New York. Played 17 minutes and 26 seconds on the first line with Bo Horvat and Anders Lee. No power play time, though, for Engvall. Like I mentioned, no points. But Rasmus Sandin, 3 assists, playing on the top pair in Washington, playing on the top power play unit as well. So got an opportunity to feed Alex Ovechkin one-timer passes with the man advantage. And for Sandin, was on the ice for a couple of goals as well. So a bit of good and a bit of bad. But that's your quick update on the former Maple Leafs and their new situations. But let's wrap things up here, Dave. Media meal musings, your grade for Vancouver.
Yeah, I'm going to give this one a B. It tasted all right. It was interesting. I talked to some other reporter colleagues of mine that said it's usually like not as good. So I don't know if it's because Toronto's in town, they're stepping up their game. but it was a brunch, which was an odd choice for brunch because it was 2:30. So they had some beef, they had some salmon. I love salmon, like just having like lox and that kind of stuff as an option for a medium meal is fantastic. And you're out west, so why would you not want fish? So that part was good. There was some pineapple to go with some of the meat, which was kind of an interesting take. So some good options. $14 was not the most expensive on this trip. Of course, that crown definitely goes to Edmonton, but Edmonton had more variety. So it was all right. So I'd give it a B minus. Let's go with a B minus.
All right, that's not too bad. I like that you said maybe they stepped up their game with Toronto in town, and maybe that's the case for sure.
Hey,
that they want to treat the East Coasters well.
Well, there's that. There's just there was one time I haven't mentioned it on here, but I told the story actually while I was in Vancouver when I was covering the COVID season, and the Leafs played that first game in Ottawa. It was the first of two. Of course, we're all masked up. No one's in the building. But then there was a nice little meal thing. It's like, hey, we're providing this meal courtesy of Eugene Melnyk. I'm like, oh, that's pretty nice. And so I had, it was okay, but it was free. It was whatever. And then they were playing the Leafs again 2 nights later because remember they mashed up all the games together that way they were doing in that all Canadian division, and there was nothing. And it's like, okay, well, the first game you want to do this, but then second game nothing. So that does happen sometimes. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's very interesting to set it up that way. But good thing, like you said, wasn't bad, wasn't maybe great. So B minus, kind of ranks middle of the
good
pack.
Coffee,
so,
very good coffee. There's not a lot of good arena. There's not a lot of good arena coffee. So if you want to count that as a meal thing, but they had almond milk as a choice. I was actually impressed. Most places do not give you a non-dairy option for the creamer, and they had almond milk. So I was kind of impressed with that.
All right, shout out Vancouver for the almond milk, getting all bougie there with the creamer for the coffee. But there you have it, the latest media meal musing to wrap up the West Coast trip. The next Rink-Wide Toronto post-game show will be on Tuesday when the Maple Leafs head off to Jersey to take on the Devils, and we'll have it for you, media meal musings for the Prudential Center for the Rock.
Oh, I can already tell you it's terrible.
What's going on there?
We were already there for one thing. This was before I was really starting to TikTok them. But it's cash only, which also is just ridiculous. But anyway, we'll get to it.
Well, I was going to say, you mentioned it last time as well. The Leafs haven't been there since the Devils fans went berserk and threw beer bottles on the ice because of the terrible
snapping the winning streak.
So
because it was the Leafs' fault apparently.
I'm sure there will be fireworks yet again. It should be a must-see game with the additions that the Devils made. Of course, Timo Meier set to take on the Maple Leafs. Should be a barn burner on Tuesday, and we'll have it for you here on Rink-Wide Toronto post-game and give you our thoughts on what goes down. Make sure to like, review, and subscribe to the pod wherever you get your favorite pods. Follow us on Twitter, Rink-Wide TOR, DAlter, and RobWong34, and you can always find the pod at RinkWideToronto.com. For David Alter and producer Aaron, I'm Rob Wong. You've been listening to Rink-Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds, where everyone goes to play. It's Rink-Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game.